welcome to the Outlap. Hey boys, how we doing?
Doing well. Happy to be back.
Doing well. Racing is back in across the world. In America, American racing is great, and all the other racing across the world has been awesome too. It's been a great couple weeks.
No, I know. Since we last spoke, right? I think a handful of races have gone down. We went on maybe a premature summer vacation of sorts, but we are busy, and all 11 of our subscribers were anticipating our next pod, so we're here.
Do we have 11 subscribers, really?
Oh, we got 11,
yeah, we
maybe.
do.
I didn't know that. Hey, everybody. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, 3 of them is my mom, and her account she keeps forgetting to log in and out of, so.
I actually don't think that's the case. But.
Well, cool, guys. Handful of races that we've missed or need to obviously catch up on. But I think generally stoked for where we're at in the season. Like, if you were to wipe out our previous podcast and then jump into today, it feels like a completely different season. Like it's incredible.
It does. If you would have told me that at the third of the way point, that close to third of the way point that we're at right now, that Red Bull probably doesn't have the fastest car, I would say you're fucking crazy. That it's insane what's happening right now. I've been talked about my friends that don't watch F1, that just kind of watch the highlights or shit on F1 for not being exciting. I've been pounding the table saying you have to watch F1 right now. It's awesome.
No, yeah. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it's nice to go into a race weekend and genuinely not know who's going to put it on pole, genuinely not know who's going to win, and it's not just a race for second, because that's really the way it was. And so, we had Lando's fantastic first win, and then, it was beautiful to see Max not win the next race in Monaco. And I think we should spend just a quick bit on that, just because it was cool to see Charles get his home win in Monaco. But that was the worst race I've ever seen, and I don't think that's fallen on deaf ears anywhere. So it's just one of those things where a lot of conversation kind of started. The drivers were very angry as well after that race, just with kind of how it went down. Just want to hear your guys' thoughts.
No, listen, Monaco is, I think, a staple in the F1 spheres. Now, I think the issue that I have with Monaco and my biggest rub is that it hasn't been cool since the cars have gotten big. The bigger the cars, an old school tiny racetrack like that, literally I think becomes a qualifying race, and then it's just as long as an engine doesn't grenade or Charles doesn't put it in the wall to screw up a gearbox like he did years past. If you qualify on pole, that's your dub. And I think for all of the lore that is Monaco, I would love to see it be a legit race. I don't think we should get rid of that. It's one of the track circuits I quite like. Street circuits that I quite like, but I just like it for its historic nature, maybe not so much for its actual utility to the sport.
I think that's been kind of known for a while, right? With the cars getting bigger. But one thing that I love about Monaco is the qualifying session is absolutely gripping every single time. The margins are so thin. Watching them go around the swimming pool chicane at 1,000,000 miles an hour and just cars tilting on edge is awesome, man. That's a really cool track, and that was a great race weekend. It's been really painful to see Leclerc. They say it 4 different ways.
Chuck Leclerc.
Yeah, Chuck Leclerc.
We'll just call him that because we're American.
It was really good to see him not fumble the bag this time. Seeing him crash out from the lead the Ferrari strategy from the lead a while back. The pit stop was really, really brutal. Glad he got it done.
Feel you there. And it's obviously he's the only Monegasque driver in the field, so cool to see. It's always cool to see someone win their home Grand Prix. So moving on from Monaco, though, I brushed over Imola. Max did win Imola, but it was a very good race with Lando tracking him down, and which kind of was our first glimpse of, is this real? Is this the real deal, or was this a one-off? With McLaren showing legit Ferrari level pace, and then it replicated itself again in Canada. I thought both Imola and Canada were both really good races. Canada was a little bit unique in terms of the changeable conditions. I wish that the track, as a McLaren fan, would have stayed drying for forever, because Lando had a rocket ship attached to his car when the track was drying out.
Man, I love the Canadian Grand Prix. I think that was like
so good.
Maybe some of the best one of the best races I've watched in a couple of years, and I say that not just because like it was changing tracks and this, that, and the other, but like strategy was great, racing close, like everybody. It felt like the last race that we just saw, Ferrari was kind of falling off, Mercedes kind of picking it up. Canada felt like it was like almost as like spec series, kind of like it's up to the driver and the strategy as I've seen it. Also, the Haas move on the wet tires was sick to watch.
That was
them
so sick.
Just carve up the field. Now things went sideways because it stopped raining, but damn, did I enjoy that.
I was literally like that whole race was fucking amazing. I was literally like when Haas put on the wets and started coming through the field, I was jumping up and down. I was hoping for some rain. And then I think at one point in the race, speaking of tires, I think we saw inners, wets, and 2 different sets of slicks on the track at the same time. Never seen that before. Crazy racing. That was a blast. And that was the Lando dub, right?
No. So Canada, Max won, and George was actually on pole with the same time. So that's the one we didn't call. Weird oddity of Formula One: 3 decimal places, and 2 guys put the exact same time in qualifying. The driver who set the lap first ended up on pole, which was George Russell. And the one thing that I loved about Canada, like obviously all the strategy and stuff played into it, but we were sitting there with 15-20 laps to go with 5 cars in the same shot with a chance to win the race. It was just like that's what we're here for. It was a beautiful race, and on the note of the previous Max Verstappen dominance, I don't care if the dude wins races if he's earn and wins, right? Like I'm perfectly fine seeing somebody like win a 7-round or 10-round heavyweight battle, not just knock a guy out in the first round, which is what a lot of the races were, at the beginning of the season. So, and I think that kind of brings us to Spain, which was a very similar situation, right? Like Max, you alluded to it earlier, Trav, they don't have the best car anymore in race pace or in quality trim. And Spain is traditionally a really, really good, marker of performance because it has a good mix, but also previously that's where F1 used to do all of their testing. So teams have probably the most data on Spain than any other track. This was that final cherry on top of this era of races since Miami to really solidify that Red Bull is not in the driver's seat like they once were.
So on that topic, I think related to Red Bull, I think as much as I've shit on Max for being a whiny little turd in the cockpit, the dude is nasty. Like he's now getting chased by cars that like kind of outgun him, and there's still times within a lap that like you're like, how is he getting like a half second out of these dudes in a lap, like on older tires and all this stuff. And it's just like he's just that good. So I don't know, mark it in your calendars. Mike said something good about Max Verstappen, but yeah, absolutely nasty. I think it'd be interesting to dive into, I don't know if it's on this one or later, of like, why isn't Red Bull keeping the pace? Like, have they maxed out their performance? Is it a budget issue? Like, what is it that's not letting them take the leaps and bounds that the other kind of like midfield or I guess upper field teams are taking? I have some speculations, but I don't know. You guys heard anything there?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think one of the biggest shames of racing series when it's really, F1 in particular, is when it's really lopsided, is you don't get to see the premier drivers really doing their thing. Right, like Max is winning races, Mike, like you said, but he's not really pushing. Like the car is overdoing it. We've seen the past couple weeks where Max is really pushing, and it's captivating. He's an amazing driver, just like you said. In terms of the performance, though, I think what's happening, and from reports, it looks like they've maxed out just kind of the concept, and everybody's kind of catching up. There's not really much else they can do. Once you figure out the ground effect concept, there's not really much else you can do to improve aero, and the power units other than the Renault are all pretty good. So I think they're just kind of catching up, and everybody's maxing out. So super interesting to see.
Yeah, I would echo that as well, Trav. That's what I've heard, and I think there's an element of in all of this, as close as F1 is right now, the budget cap working, right? I think there's an element of the budget cap working, but to Trav's point, we are very implanted within a car concept where the regulations have not changed. They, have probably gotten pretty close to maximizing that concept, and these other teams are starting to catch up. And it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, they don't have Nui in their corner anymore to be finding those little extra things to get creative. So it'll be interesting to see. But Red Bull did not get in the position that they're in by just relying on Adrian Nui. So I think we'll definitely see some updates to come, because there haven't really been many from Red Bull actually this year as well. They did a few early, and then their car's been pretty stagnant. And I think they kind of started to realize that they are maximizing their current concept, and they might start to be pursuing other avenues. What that looks like will be really interesting to see. And then, the only other thing that I thought was really interesting was traditionally, too, Spain is a big upgrade circuit, and there was a lot fewer upgrades because this is a different time in the season that it's happened.
Yeah.
So traditionally Spain was earlier, so this was always the big first upgrade package, which is again another reason why teams had so much data around here. They used to do testing here. It was early in the season, so it also lined up for that. I thought it was interesting that there wasn't many teams that brought upgrades to Spain.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the underrated parts about the cars getting a little bit closer too is we've seen some of the best qualifying laps in the past couple of years. George's lap to match Max was unbelievable, just totally on edge the whole time. And same with Lando. I think that has a lot to do with the car as well. But given that Max got a toe on the start-finish straight, and Lando beat him by 200ths when it could have been 2/10ths, it was pretty amazing. The guy was absolutely flying, and that's been fun to watch. You can visually see it on TV, right? Like, first couple years of the regs, you could see the cars kind of unsettled around corners, and you could see them not really, kind of moving up and down under braking, and the drivers aren't able to really send it.
Call it the attitude of the car.
Yeah, totally, the attitude of the car. Things like trail braking and stuff that those guys are really good at. They haven't been really able to do it, so it's been so cool to actually see F1. Arguably, F1 has been the worst racing series in the past 3 years. It is not the case anymore. The cars are performing like they should. It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, if you want to still get an idea of how hard some of those cars are to drive, just watch that green kick Sauber seemingly constantly want to go sideways on Bottas, because I was looking, they were showing the last 4 or 5 folks to qualify on pole at the Spanish Grand Prix, and I just there was some harsh comments of Bottas should join the circus with Daniel Ricciardo, and he's kind of done in F1, and the he's just steady Eddie. I just think if that man did one thing well, it's he drove with Lewis for as long as he did, under the idea that he was going to be as good if Lewis was on his game, he's number 2. If he's not, guess what? He's gonna win in qualifying. He might win a race. The dude's steady Eddie. I think he's in a bad car. I think he's obviously aging out of the sport a little bit and not being a star. He ends up at Kick Sauber, but man, watching that dude who I know can drive that car, and he's into turn 1 and the whole ass end is kicking out on him, and it's just that looks tough. It looks tough back there.
To be fair though, Bottas seems to be taking a different route in life right now, right? He did a 100-mile gravel bike race in the U.S. pretty recently. He's doing the naked calendars and all the Kick Sauber. If you're not following the Kick Sauber social media, I don't even have social media, and I see it on Twitter every once in a while, just searching F1 stuff, and they're really good. But he seems to be chilling. I agree with you. I don't really think that he's going to be a competitive driver moving forward, but he's got to be great for a team that isn't super competitive and wants to generate, revenue for their sponsors and stuff like that. Probably pretty good at sponsor appearances. So I hope he stays around. He's a great driver. He's not a top tier driver, maybe even second or third tier, but it's fun to watch him drive.
Yeah. So on that topic, let's talk driver market, because obviously a handful of things have gotten locked in, handful of good drivers still without a seat. What do we think about Sainz? Where do we think Sainz is going? I think it's getting boiled down more. I think it's got to be Williams, right?
It's Williams or Audi is what I've heard.
And Senior Sainz is obviously an Audi man for the off-road racing series, but like, does that mean Carlos is also driving for Audi? I don't think so. I think he goes to Williams. Honestly, what was it, last podcast, Trav? Or maybe even off it was Williams 2026?
Yeah, I was about to say, you guys have heard my prophesying about Williams. I genuinely think that because of the VC money, Williams will be a championship contender in 2 or 3 years. But a lot of rumors about Sainz and Newey going to Williams, which would be absolutely sick. I would love. Albon even said something else that clued me in to the futures bet that I'm going to place here in a little bit is Albon said the other day that he would prefer that the Williams car is behind for 2025 so that they can come prepared for 2026. What that means to me is they are developing into a serious team, and serious teams pick serious drivers and technical people, and I think there's a really good chance. I hope so. That's what I want. I think Sainz and Albon would immediately be like the third best driver pairing out there.
Yeah. No, I think Albon is, now that I think he's like coming into his own within F1, I think he's getting better and better, and the car's slowly starting to match. I think getting a guy like Sainz on his team as well will only help him close any gaps that exist. The interesting thing, right, with VC money, right? I work for startups, Nick worked for startups, Trav, you work for startups. They want quick returns on investment. And like, honestly, when you look at like, is it just a handful of partners like wanting to get into a motorsport, and that's what they picked F1? There's cheaper ways to do it. So I gotta think they're pretty dang serious about taking this to be like a legit return on investment. And with that, I think comes a pretty crazy overhaul of what they're doing over there. So I don't know. I'm not saying no. I don't know if I'm like a grand on that line, but I'm interested. I'm interested for 10 right now, maybe 100.
Motorsport actually put out an article that Alpine was in advanced talks with Sainz, which would be an absolute disgrace. I don't want to see that. I don't think anybody wants to see that. Alpine is also, speaking of Alpine, they're also considering not being an engine manufacturer anymore, which is kind of crazy. So it just doesn't seem like they're super invested. So you got to think it's Williams. For me, that's what I have to guess. But I think Audi would be pretty cool. I'm not totally sure that Audi doesn't want 2 German drivers in the car though. I just don't know who else they'd get in there.
So I think that right now, I kind of wrote it down, but Sainz is definitely the domino that will knock down the rest of the drivers market, and even the other drivers have said that they're kind of waiting on his decision, and it is between those two. I think he's probably looking at it at the lens of, theoretically, with the motorsport history of Audi, that does have a higher ceiling, but how much more of a long-term play is that, in my mind? I mean, Williams, I think, probably has a lot shorter path to be in that echelon of teams than Sauber does at their current, they haven't had the years of investment that Williams have been going through of building up personnel, building up facilities. And so they will get there. I have no doubt that we will be talking in 10 years about an Audi championship that, they're running away with, but that's kind of where I feel like he'll probably end up with Williams. They are showing more promise, but it's sad to see a guy like Sainz end up at Williams. I hope you're right, Trav, but I personally don't see that 2026 in the current era of Formula One. I think it is going to be extremely, extremely hard for any team that's not a constructor, that is a customer team with customer engines, to genuinely win a championship. I think that will continue into 26. There's obviously been anomalies. I don't know if you saw my face when you were saying that. Like, it's bold. I see what you're seeing, but at the same time, I don't think, and it's kind of the same thing in MotoGP. There's been teams that have, like, our customer teams that just still can't compete, and I think it's the same thing in Formula One. They're going to be close, but there is a level of compromise that comes with your design when you don't have any design input on the engine and the powertrain, which, you know, just makes that a little bit tougher. I'm not saying it can't be done. It's just with the current way I see Formula One, any of the customer teams, I think it would be really, really hard to win.
That's totally fair. That's totally fair. And, you know, there in other motorsports currently right now, there are some customer teams beating their manufacturers. Notably, the AM Corsa team beat both the Ferrari factory teams at Le Mans. So it's out there. It can happen. That probably has a lot to do with Kubica driving his nuts off in Le Mans, but
one-handed and all.
One-handed and all. That was really cool. But another
hold
rumor.
on.
Yeah.
Back up. Fill me in here. What's Kubica driving one hand? Like, did he break a hand? What's he?
All right, here's a little fun history lesson. Robert Kubica came into Formula One in like the mid 2000s, I believe, like early, before 2010. He was an up and coming driver. Ended up getting in a really severe accident, I believe, doing a different racing series. So I don't know if it was Dakar or Rally or something like that, but essentially had a Formula One seat, was doing this in the off season, ended up getting severely injured, and he has pretty much lost operation of one hand. So he has one hand that's like his entire arm is very scrawny and he can't really do much with it. So he's driving a Formula One car essentially one-handed.
Dude, sick.
He's a menace. He's one of those guys like Kimi Räikkönen that, like, I really enjoy watching back in the old days. Like, maybe he didn't win a ton, but guy was always sending it. Was always on the edge. It was a lot of fun to watch. Back to driver rumors. I heard one today. You know how gossipy F1 is. Like, you never really know what's true, but apparently there is an Australian driver very deep in talks with the Audi team. Whether that's doing.
Yeah,
doing or Lawson? You think it's doing?
I think it's doing. Well, Lawson's a Kiwi too. He's a Kiwi. Right. So if you heard an Australian, it's doing for sure. He was featured pretty heavily this weekend on the F1 TV broadcasts and got asked a couple times. I saw a few little smirks and avoiding of questions. So in my mind, it's pretty much done and dusted. He just can't say anything yet. So I believe Jack Doohan. On that note, and in the name of driver changes, I really wanted to just bring up Liam Lawson now that you have brought him up. Love Daniel Ricciardo, but if they keep Daniel Ricciardo over giving Liam Lawson a seat and a shot in F1, I understand Daniel Ricciardo has a lot of commercial stuff that he brings to the team, but it's a crime if Liam Lawson doesn't get a seat. This dude, and I know I brought this up previously, he was in a racing series with Alex Albon, DTM, the year that Alex Albon, after he got canned from Red Bull, and he fucked Alex Albon up and got second in the championship because he got wrecked out in the final corner. And, you know, Alex Albon is looked at in Formula One as a very, very good driver. So, and then to top on all of that, he stepped in for Danny Rick last season and did far better than a guy like Logan Sargent or Mick Schumacher or any of the recent guys that have really, Zhou Guan Yu, like, hasn't impressed either. So it's like really more than any of the guys that have recently come into the sport. You'd think that with a team, realistically, the Red Bull family having 4 seats on the F1 grid, that they wouldn't let talent like that languish, and it's frustrating as hell. I really, really hope he ends up with a seat.
Yeah, I do too. No. He's fun to watch. Another thing too with driver market, guys. I think we might see a change this year. I don't know if you guys have been keeping up, but the
Fingers
FIA,
crossed.
The FIA has made super license available at 17 years old at the sole discretion of the FIA. So basically, this is what I'm calling the Kimi Antonelli rule, right? Like, they are basically saying that the age is still 18, but if you're 17 and the FIA thinks that you're a really good driver, they will grant you a super license. So with how bad Logan Sargent has been this year, oh my God, it's so bad, it's embarrassing. I think there's a really good chance that Sargent's gone soon and Antonelli gets some experience in the Williams before the end of the year. That'd be super cool because from all indications, like, Toto loves Antonelli. That's his boy. Right. He's not having the best year in F2. But I still think that there's a really good chance that he gets in, and hopefully this year in the Williams. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, no, that'd be interesting. I think Sargent knows his goose is cooked, and who knows? It's probably like the classic like lame duck president where he actually gets some stuff done once he like relaxes and does that. But I wouldn't hold my breath back there. Like, shout out to the American, but you're not doing.
I'm just saying, man.
solids.
He's down now 31-0 in Alex Albon in qualifying.
I know.
You've had your chances, and then
Time to go.
I thought it was hilarious. I wanted to bring this up that I texted in the group during Canada, and I was like, "Don't worry, we've got Logan Sargent still out there. He'll cause a yellow flag and a safety car." I said that on lap 5, and he made me look like a genius.
Yeah. Real quick, with Sergio Perez re-signing with Red Bull.
I roll.
Yeah, I roll. But also, guys, what is going on with him? As all these other teams are throwing these upgrades out, he just seems to be falling further and further the back with like his quality. And then again, the car doesn't seem as dominant anymore. And I've always thought that it like hasn't looked terribly dominant when it gets into like a ton of dirty air. But like he's unable to move up the pack, like up the grid like that well. Like, are we just going to see like a sad Sergio at the back of the pack for the rest of the year? Like, what's going on?
He's taking the Odell Beckham Jr. route. He's getting paid and he's chilling. Like it's very clear that he, at the beginning of the year, was racing for a contract, and he got the contract and seems to have turned it down, which is a real shame. And even more of a shame, I think Red Bull's okay with it. Like, I think they don't want Max to have a real challenger in the seat. I don't think they would have signed Perez if they did, right? So
yeah, just the old vest and rest kind of contracts.
Yeah, but it's been a rough go. You know, DNF in Monaco with that really bad wreck, DNF in Canada, and then this weekend in Spain, just barely sneaking into the points, but he just barely got past the Alpines in a Red Bull. So. Yeah, it's that's another one where it's a real head scratcher. I think Daniel Ricciardo does a better job in that seat than he's doing right now, right? I think so, at least, right? And the thing is, Sergio, I've thought about this before. Sergio Perez would have gone into irrelevancy if he did not win Secure 2020. That was his, he had a lot of great drives before that, but that was his real flash in the pan in the last 4 or 5 years that has really done anything to impress me. He's gotten the one-off win, but that's again with the most dominant car in the field. We're not patting Max on the back for winning races when they have that, so why should we do that for him? Real head scratcher again. I just it's an appeasing Max move is the only thing that can rationalize it in my mind. And what ultimately Mercedes was unwilling to do with Bottas, and then they end up losing Lewis Hamilton because of it. I bet you if in an alternate universe, if Bottas is still at Mercedes, I don't think Lewis even thinks about leaving if he's not getting challenged.
Yeah, that's fair. I think Lewis had a lot to do with car development as well, and his input and standing in the team. But I feel with all these young drivers in the market, right? Another driver testing right now. Mick Schumacher's testing for Alpine. So there's a lot of other drivers trying to break in the sport, and I can't see Perez sitting in that seat too long, even with the contract. The contract, it was a multi-year. It wasn't disclosed how long, but I can't really see him keeping that seat if he keeps up the entire pace for 2 more years. That doesn't seem realistic with the amount of talent and money in young drivers that's out there.
For sure. Well, boys, what else is happening outside of the world of F1?
Well, let's before we do that, let's talk a little bit about Spain, because Spain was awesome. Really, really fun race. Obviously the quali was amazing. That's a really fun quali track. There's a lot of really cool corners. It's a really challenging track. There's a lot of variety, and the drivers seem to really enjoy the challenge of the track. So seeing those guys go around quali Lando was awesome. The start for George, it's the best start of the year. It was unbelievable. He absolutely sent it. And hearing his comments after the race, he actually had been practicing on the laps, on the practice laps, how hard he could go into turn 1 around the outside, which is the racing line. You don't see that a whole lot, but that is the racing line around turn 1. And he was talking about, he knew it was a calculated risk. Like, he was planning to send it if he got a good start, and he nailed it. It was unbelievable. One of the best overtakes of the year, behind probably Albon's to double overtake in Canada. That was like breathtaking.
That was so good.
But that was super fun. Unfortunately, it ruined the race, right? George getting out front really slowed down the pack, and the pace turned into something really slow. And he obviously eventually got overtaken by the faster cars, but I mean, unbelievable stuff from him in front. And that's the kind of stuff about F1 that gets you out of your seat.
Best start of the year, for sure. Best start of the year. That was. I don't think anybody expected him to come from P4 to the start. Lando got a crappy start, pushed Max onto the grass a little bit. Love seeing the elbows get out, and then he didn't want to admit fault in the driver press conference afterwards, which I thought was hilarious.
So funny. I'm glad you brought that up, Mike. If you didn't see that, Lando basically said, like, in the post race on the couch, he was like, yeah, and I think I left Max plenty of space, and Max was like, I know what I'm getting you for. Yeah, he was laughing. He was like, I know what I'm getting you for your birthday. He's like, I'm either going to get you a big mirror or a pair of glasses. And both
it was just a racing incident.
Yeah. Yes, just an incident. No, that was a hell of a start. And, the one thing, too, I wanted to call out just for, like, the deeper cuts of F1. Last year, they made a change to Spain, got rid of the chicane leading onto the start-finish straight. Last year's race wasn't very good, but there was a lot of overtakes into turn 1 into this race, and that was a clear impact of making that change. Drivers used to kind of traditionally, and like fans used to go into the Spain race kind of assuming it wasn't going to be a very good race. So it's good to see that track change was a change made by the FIA and the organizer to make better racing, and it worked. That was the best race I've personally watched at Spain. Normally it's not a very good one, and it turns into a little bit of a snoozer with how early it is here for us in the States.
Yeah, sure. Nick, talk to me a little bit about strategy, right? Because I think there was a super interesting strategy race. McLaren actually might have pulled off a strategy that, if it weren't for a bad pit stop, might have pulled off a strategy that nobody was talking about, right? Every single strategist on the wall was saying the undercut is going to work. The undercut is going to work. This is an undercut track. And just because of track position at the start, McLaren went long. So would love for you to talk us through that and what your thoughts on that were as the resident McLaren fan.
So you can only do an overcut if you've got pace. So that's the biggest thing, is why you don't see that pulled off very often, because it is an instance like that where someone's being held up by dirty air and then that car disappears and now they've just unlocked a second, 0.8 of a second of pace. And it's just a lot harder to execute than the undercut. The undercut is relying more on just tire delta. The overcut is building that tire delta. So it's short-term gain for long-term pain for the undercut. You're going to be dying at the end of the race, whereas a lot of times it's the opposite with the overcut, and you're having to push really hard on bad tires right at the end of your stint, which is really, really tough to do, to then hopefully build that gap. And then the other piece that makes it tough is a lot of times with the overcut, you end up having to still overtake cars on track too, which obviously is easier said than done. Track position is big on a lot of tracks with as big as these cars are. So that's the kind of difference between the under and overcut. I think the overcut's a lot harder to execute than the undercut is. It can, and it also realistically be a better benefit long term.
Yeah, and for those of you at home that have no idea what an under or overcut is, it's the idea of traditionally you try to pit with your competing racers, so you go 1-to-1 on pit stops. The undercut is pitting early, the overcut is pitting later, and it's all tire strategy like Nick was just explaining. But
yeah, track position first, and then tire strategy kind of comes into play. I thought it was when they were doing it, I thought he was going to finish 8th, right? It seemed like a really bad idea, but Nick, to your point, they had some pace, and then the pit stop really kind of screwed them. They had a second longer pit stop than they were hoping, and essentially wiped out that entire tire delta I think it was 7-lap tire delta, trying to get past other drivers. So that was a little frustrating. I loved hearing the radio. Lando was super calm, and the quote near the end of the race said, he's like, "Are we here to finish first or second?" And I thought that was really cool. And I'm glad they went for it. I wish it would have worked out, but I think it just wasn't going to work. Like even towards the end of the race, Lando was catching Max, right? And that's where you start thinking the overcut's going to work, right? But I think that's kind of a faux pas in racing, because if you think about it, like the guy in front is not trying to catch. He's trying to maintain his tires and he's trying to stay out front, where the car behind is going to be at a higher pace, especially when they're 7 seconds back. He's going to be on edge. He's got the tires. So I don't really think there was ever a chance for him to get it done. Like I think Max had a couple push laps in his tires that he hadn't used, but still was super interesting. And for a strategy that was, nobody was thinking about, for them to give it a shot, fail, and still finish in second place, I think shows you how good the McLaren car is starting to be.
On that same note, how great is it seeing Lando now disappointed for not winning?
Yeah, I know.
He was like pissed. He was pissed. I was like, that as a McLaren fan is super awesome to see that change in mindset, because like he doesn't have and as a Lando fan, whenever he would have a chance to win the race, you could feel it in the announcers, you could feel it in the team. There was like that tension just started ratcheting up. Exactly. And so it's good to see now where he's hunting down wins, not trying to not lose. And that's the way it has felt in a lot of the other chances. So I think that speaks to their underlying pace as well. You a lot of times hear drivers talk down the pace of their car. Very rarely do you have a guy that finishes second and say, we had the fastest car and driver combo, and I'm pissed we didn't win.
Right.
At least a team that's not number one in the constructors, right?
Yeah. Listen, I think, so for everyone listening at home, Nick is dripped out in all his McLaren gear. He hasn't taken it off one day if Lando doesn't finish, until Lando finishes out of the top 5. So he's currently sequestered to his basement. But yeah, dude, the McLaren, it's sick to see, honestly. And then Piastri, I think, has done good. I wouldn't say he's done great, but I think he's done good for like being, I would say, like finally coming into like as nasty of a car as he's got. It'll be interesting to see how he slowly starts to move up in like quality pace and like grid, because it does feel like, as much as we want to say it's the car and the driver and it's just like pure skill, there's a lot of experience of just like the nuance of the game. And I think that's one of the things that I want to highlight if someone's just tuning in today to F1. Is like, what we're getting right now is getting to be the fun part of F1, because we're starting to be able to see like the gameplay has to level up, because the mechanics of it all is leveling out. And so people have to start that tire strat. They have to start doing some of this stuff to like fight for wins. We're not doing that for second and third or third and fourth like we were, which is kind of a snoozer anyways. But
yeah,
anyways.
It also really highlights the driver as well. Just seeing like, for example, I think it's really easy to overdrive the car and slow down. So especially when the cars are like really close together, they know they have some tight deltas to hit in pit stops. Drivers really start to come out, and it's been really cool to see Lando mature. I think previously he might have overdriven the car, and he's not. He's calm, he's collected. I think the next two weeks are going to be really big for them, because they're both purpose-built road courses, and then they go back to some street circuits, and Ferrari seems to think that they have a really good street circuit car. So I think these next 2 weeks are really important for McLaren to get some good results, so that they can stay ahead of Ferrari and continue to challenge for the championship.
Quick question for you before we move on from the world of F1. So Mercedes kind of out of nowhere, honestly, picking up pace and competing for front row. George, I think, looking good in quali. Is George missing something to be able to kind of hold on at the front? Like, I think for him to qualify as well as he is, like, says like, oh, George is a good driver. But then you see the likes of Lewis in a similar car just continually to kind of deliver in the race, where George like seems to always have this like stumble moment. Like he's like the waiter that drops all the glasses. I don't know. It doesn't feel like George has got the juice. I don't know. What did you guys take there?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, George did kind of get screwed in pit stops, and he was on the primary strategy, and he got behind Lewis just because of a bad pit stop. So that was pretty frustrating for him, I think. But I totally agree, Mike. I think George is one of those guys that has a tendency to overdrive the car. He's a really aggressive driver. He wants so badly to be a great driver, and he has flashes of brilliance like in lap 1, but Mercedes is behind Ferrari and Red Bull and McLaren for sure. I think that's a big part of it, but also I think George has a tendency to overdrive a little bit in scenarios. You see that with him pretty regularly, almost week to week, right? Trying to make a move up the inside that isn't there, or something like that. You see from George. A lot of times it works out, and a lot of times it doesn't.
I will say I'm actually a little bit on the other side of the coin with George Russell, knowing, I mean, he's a guy that came into F1 winning everything he touched. Absolutely everything. And so, and also had to experience the absolute shitbox that was Williams for a long time. But he hasn't had a lot of experience recently in that fight at the top, so I feel like maybe it's a little bit rusty. And and I will say I feel like there might be just a touch of recency bias in this, just in the fact of when he was leading the race in, I believe it was Imola, or whenever he was he made a lot of mistakes there. I don't see George as that guy. He kind of got the moniker as Mr. Saturday. I kind of see him as like the way I see Piastri and Lando. He feels like he just has a little bit to go in terms of the race management side of things. The overall underlying pace is absolutely there. So I think he's got the chops from that perspective. I think he's a proven championship winner, and if you think that, the lower series are any less pressure or mean any less to these guys, you're wrong. So, I think he's got the chops, but I think it might be one of those things where it's got to sharpen the knife again, and this is the first opportunity to do so.
So yeah, I can understand that a little bit, but I want you to also zoom out. You're Toto Wolff. Are you betting the farm on George Russell to take you to a championship in the next 2 years?
I think I would personally. I think he's. I think if they get the car right, for sure, he's really good. He's never been in a dominant car. He drove the Mercedes one time a couple of years ago, but he's never been in a dominant car. Mercedes is at a delta. It's closing. Lewis got P3, a solid P3, not an accidental P3. It was an okay drive, and the car was fast. I think I'm taking the bet on George. I think he's super talented. I'm with Nick. I think he's still got some sharpening to do, but he's going to get there, and I think he'll mature with time and just kind of learn from those mistakes.
Well, you also got to remember too how he's been comparing to the 7-time world champion that is Lewis Hamilton. He has held up very, very well. And I think a lot of people expected him to walk in the team and it be a Logan Sargent, Alex Albon situation, and Lewis is 30-0 in him. And that has been far from the truth. So I think a lot of people, too, like last year, would discount when George was beating Lewis and say, oh, well, Lewis doesn't have a car that's winning for a championship. He's got that next gear. At the same time, that's your one true marker. And if that marker is also a 7-time world champion and you can at least hold up to snuff, you can probably, I think you've got the chops to win a championship, personally.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm growing out the hair. So George lets me down. The lettuce.
When's this coming? When's the pose coming?
Yeah,
he doesn't have it this year.
The two hands on the wall. Yeah. Anyways,
before we move on to other racing series, let's talk 2026 car updates real quick. That dropped while we were gone. Mike, have you looked into this at all? You know what's coming?
Yeah, shorter cars, different aero package. I would say, from what I've heard from drivers in the sim thus far, is they think the car is a little bit slower than the car today, which will be, I think, is an interesting kind of hot take today from drivers where we think of F1 is constantly pushing the limit of speed. So we'll see what comes of that. I think in my perfect world, when I look at the full driver change, if we're going to keep some of these street circuits on, I would love there to be 2 cars in a garage. I would love there to be a street track car, and it was dedicated, purpose built, smaller, made the racing more enjoyable, and then we had full F1 on steroids kind of thing. I think it's a step in the right direction. Is it a nominal enough change to really matter in that space? I don't think so, but
I'm excited about it personally. I think the number that I heard was 60% less downforce, right? Is that right, Nick, or was it something a little bit lower?
I don't know for sure.
It was
on
a
that,
lot.
But
it was a lot.
Yeah.
So basically, what's happening with the cars in 2026, Mike? You mentioned they're shorter, they're narrower, they're 50 kilograms lighter. they're also going to be a lot less reliant on ground effects and have a lot less aero involved. So that's going to give the cars a lot less downforce, which less downforce, we see that with cold tires. We see that with wet racing. It's awesome. But to your point, like, there is some concern for the drivers for being at the forefront of motorsport. I think what they're saying is not necessarily fast on straight line speed, but the fastest cornering cars, right? They want the cars that can rip around the corners, and the drivers seem to be a little concerned with that. But I think that it's kind of interesting, actually. What's happening right now is that a lot of the drivers or a lot of the teams are looking to push out regulations so that they can continue to develop them and make them better cars. But Mercedes said, no fucking way, give me a car and let's race. They denied it. So I think the regs are up at the end of the month, and they'll be permanent at the end of the month, and super interesting. And DRS is gone, which is, I think, probably the best thing that they did.
Well, to a point, right? So DRS still exists, but not in its current form. So that's kind of the one weird little nuance, is that there's like a built-in DRS on certain sections of the track. They're calling it, like, I think X mode and Z mode.
It's so fucking stupid. So dumb.
Essentially, one is going to be full downforce, one is going to be low downforce in the way that DRS acts today. The biggest difference is it is not going to be dependent on if you're a second behind the driver in front, and both the front and rear wings are going to move, which will be interesting as well. So there's going to be kind of a DRS actuator on both the front and rear wings that's going to be flattening them out. And then, on the note of the doom and gloom side of these regs, I'm excited for them. I think it's a move in the right direction. Ultimately, too, this is without the teams really developing it at all. This is,
right.
There's a lot of things that they'll find, and I believe they'll eke a lot of pace. The only other side of things, which the engine regs for 26 have been set for a long time, but it is exciting that Formula One is going to have a power unit and technology that can realistically trickle its way down into consumer vehicles, and that has not been the case in the V6 turbo hybrid era. Like, these engines are so advanced that they're so far from anything that would ever be put in a consumer vehicle that it hasn't been realistic. They're moving to fully synthetic fuels. They're also going to be relying more on the electrical power as well. So I think now 50% of the horsepower is going to be coming from the electrical powertrain. So, I think all things that are good and is going to keep Formula One relevant in terms of it being the pinnacle of motorsport, but also still that development field. There's a lot of stuff that are in our cars today that was invented in a garage somewhere with a dude trying to prep for an F1 race. Like that, and it's good. It's exciting to kind of have that as we look into the future of electric cars, and what the marrying of electric cars and combustion cars of the future look like, is exciting for me as well.
Yeah. Well, we need to make sure we write Nikita Mazepin can no longer drive the new F1 cars, because if we're losing downforce, that dude is already spinning those things.
Don't worry, he's a DJ now. Did you know that?
I didn't know. He's a DJ.
He's a DJ now. Yeah.
There we go.
I think he just hops around on Daddy's yacht.
Yeah, Logan Sargent. We need to make sure that dude stays clear of this one. Got a question real quick, just like related to the weight. Yuki Tsunoda, little man, little weight. Some of the guys further down the field, I think George Russell, obviously a bigger dude. Did they like, I know in karting they like lead weight the cars.
Same thing. Minimum driver weight. So there's a minimum driver weight.
Kilograms, right?
No, I think it's 80 kilograms. 180 kilograms would be like 350 pounds or something crazy.
350. Yeah,
350.
216, 220 or something.
I'm not good with the imperial stuff.
All I know is there's a minimum driver weight, Mike.
Okay.
So
same
ultimately, exactly. So ultimately you want to be exactly that. Any ounce over it, you're a detriment to the team. Any ounce below it, they will have to put ballast in the car to get the same weight.
Do you think drivers similar like UFC fighters like reverse waterlog, so they like check in, weight's right, drive, lose the weight, pick up a few ounces, few pounds here and there?
Well, that's why they're also, a fun F1 history thing of why the regulations are so tight around Parc Ferme, Mike, is that there used to be fuel regulations and stuff like that. Yeah. Well, there was a team that was putting lead shot in their gasoline, at the end of the race. So they were running the car below the minimum weight for the entire race, and then they'd put lead shot in at the end with the final pit stop. So then when it's weighed in Parc Ferme, it's the correct weight. So no is the answer to your question, because they've tightened the regs so hard around that because people have already cheated it.
Yeah, the reason the minimum driver weight was established is because teams were doing what jockeys do, and they were starving their drivers to get in the car to make it as light as possible. So that's where that minimum came from.
Yeah. Put them in that car with that like 120 degrees that we had a few years ago where people were throwing up. I'm sure that would have gone over well. We probably would have lost a driver or two. So, all right, boys. Outside.
One more thing.
Oh, we're still on it. Still on it. All right. Let's do it.
One more thing with the regs. A conspiracy theory I'm hearing is that we're pushing back towards full combustion engine. That is what the sustainable fuels are about. They haven't figured them out yet. They haven't figured out how to make sustainable fuels as good as gasoline. So I think what they're pushing for, it's a total guess, right? This is just kind of a conspiracy theory out there, but I think it'd be interesting if they totally leaned into the sustainable fuel. Why would they not run a full combustion engine, right? So I think that'd be cool to see that happen. Who knows?
V12. V12, just full fuel. Let's get it, bring it back. When men were men, and cars screamed in your ears. All right, finally, can we finally leave the F1 track, boys?
I mean, this is an F1 podcast, but I guess
we can. We got some interesting stuff to talk about in other racing series. NASCAR is switching to wet tires for the first time ever. But what they've done is they have given them wet tires, and then they've taken away everything that is interesting about wet tires. They're not letting the drivers pick the wet tires. They're mandating when they can put on which tires. So the first time on an oval for wet tires was this past weekend at New Hampshire. If you guys haven't seen the wet restart for New Hampshire, go back and watch that. It's absolutely fascinating. It looks like a dirt race. Matter of fact, at the restart, there were a bunch of drivers that were in dirt racing for a long time. Notably, Chase Briscoe was up there. He was way back in the field, and he made it through the field because he's one of the guys that's used to searching for grip on different lines. And in the restart, there were guys. It's not a big track. It's a mile track in New Hampshire, but there were guys that were touching the wall down by the apron and touching the wall at the top of the circuit. It was unbelievable, and obviously, that changed. There was a dry line that developed, and that's where the tires started blistering. NASCAR fumbled the bag a little bit, but it created some really cool racing. So if you haven't checked that out, go see it.
That looks sick. Yeah, I'll dive into that one after this.
One more.
I didn't realize that, but that is super interesting. And I guess, do you see them switching to an F1 style of the drivers and teams are going to eventually be able to make that call and make that judgment call of, okay, it's switching to the wets, we're going to take a gamble on the wets or the dries, either or?
Yeah, they put out a statement this past weekend, basically after the race. Everybody was bitching about it on Twitter and whatever, and they put out a statement after the race saying, we're trying to do this in the safest way possible, but we're looking how to develop and give teams more say in what tires they're putting on. So it's just kind of a weird time right now, but some of the pictures of the tires after the race when there was a very dry line that was developed on the track, and they were making the drivers drive wet tires. So the tires were blistering like crazy, and it was really bad. Super dangerous. Drivers were getting pissed off. It was pretty crazy. So the other NASCAR thing is, if you guys haven't seen the clip of the driver spoiling the driver market, Christopher Bell, who's probably my favorite driver in the series other than Kyle Larson, he's a OG dirt racer. He's young, but he's done a lot of racing. He was doing an interview, and he said next year when Chase is in the car, and then froze. He basically gave up who they were getting in the seat, broke news
Tom Holland it.
He Tom Holland it for sure, and he him backtracking and saying whoever gets in the car, we're not really sure who's gonna be in the car was super funny. That's a great clip to look at, and he was very, very embarrassed for the rest of the interview. That was cool.
That is funny.
Okay, last thing. Did you guys watch the Indy 500?
I watched as much as I could. I saw the heartbreak finish.
Yeah, for me, I just caught the YouTube race recap, but no, I didn't tune in. I should have. I enjoyed the racing.
I was locked. You guys know that's one of my favorite events of the year. Really great race. Couple notable things. Joseph Newgarden got his second one in a row. The finish that Nick is talking about last year, if you don't remember, Pato O'Ward essentially wrecked his car. Very dangerous wreck, but had one of the sends of the year up the inside on the grass in one of the closing laps of the race for the race lead and crashed out. So same two guys at the front this year. It was Pato and Newgarden going at it again. Joseph Newgarden seemingly lifted. I think on the telemetry, it showed that he lifted and let Pato O'Ward by on the penultimate lap before the end of the race, and Joseph Newgarden overtook Pato into the final corner on the last lap and absolutely blitzed him. It was brilliant driving from Newgarden, another heartbreaker for Pato, but amazing race, man. Kyle Larson is an American hero. Like, get Logan Sargent out of an F1 car and get freaking Kyle Larson in. He was running in sixth for a long time, never having driven an Indy car before he started testing for that race. And just like to give you an understanding of what the difference is between NASCAR and Indy. NASCAR is a car with a wheel and a gear shift. There's nothing much else. It's very simple racing. A lot of races, they're not even switching gears. Even in some like short tracks, they're just kind of coasting and letting the transmission do the work and the braking. Kyle Larson drove his ass off in the race. It was really cool to see he's probably the best Indy 500 entry in a long time that wasn't an Indy driver initially. So that was super cool. I just love seeing him do his thing, and hope we get more guys that are going to try to do the double again and go do NASCAR and Indy the same day.
That's what I wanted to bring up. Was he was trying to do his best Dion impression of showing up to both games. But no, I was really impressed by him. And cool that his NASCAR team will let him go pursue something like that. I think there's probably a few teams out there that would not be. I'm sure they probably weren't super pleased with it, but the fact that they let him do it, I think that's super cool.
Yeah, and if it wasn't Kyle Larson too, like Kyle Larson is for sure the best American race car driver right now, and I don't think if it was him, I think if it wasn't him, then it's probably not going to happen. But it was super cool. If you guys haven't watched the full race and you're bored or whatever, go back and watch it. It's a lot of fun. A lot of really cool overtakes.
How good, boys. Well, what do we got next on the F1 calendar?
We got Austria, fantastic race.
So good.
Normally, Red Bull Ring, very, very fun racetrack. When I first got into sim racing, it was my absolute favorite racetrack. I think it's because it's very simple. It's a very easy track, so that's what when I was new into racing, it made me love it. But always a great spot for racing. You've got 3 long DRS zones into 2 pretty tight braking areas. The start-finish straight, you'll probably not see as many overtakes, but then into turn, I think it ends up being turn 3 and turn 4 are both going to be really, really good spots for overtakes, even when the cars were shit. They used to be fantastic racing. Throwback is, Alex Albon getting pushed onto the dirt by Lewis Hamilton, and Alex Albon not getting a chance to win that race. And then actually following that, I just wanted to bring up, we will not be able to record a podcast in between then because I am going to be in the UK and I'm actually going to be going to Silverstone. So I will have some content to share once I've returned. Going to be sitting in the grandstands at the final turn where Lewis did the double overtake over Sergio and Charles last year. So hopefully we get some good views. I'm hoping I get a view down the start-finish straight, and hopefully, don't see Zhou Guanyu going flying into the wall. But super excited to go to my first F1 race.
We're gonna need a full breakdown of that because I hear, and I don't know if you've heard this too, but I hear Silverstone is a bit of a nightmare to attend in terms of how crowded it is.
We're glamping. We don't have to worry about leaving the track. So I've heard the same thing, that it is an absolute nightmare. We don't have to leave. We are gonna show up once and we are gonna leave once. And that's what I've understood is the biggest logistical pain in the ass because it's kind of in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's like the Quidditch World Cup. Nick has a tent and you walk in and it's just plush on the inside. with rooms and rooms just to keep going, but you can't see them from the outside. So yeah, real Harry Potter vibe going down in Silverstone. No, man, that'll be good. Listen, get on the YouTube and maybe live stream a little bit of maybe of practice or something.
Wow.
But yeah, pretty stoked.
We don't have enough of a following to get in trouble, but you can't live stream Formula One cars on track, unfortunately.
Might as well give it a rip while we don't matter.
But I'll have some update stuff. I'll see if I can't rip a video while I'm out there. But we'll get this pod out, and if you guys want to run one without me, I can chop it up and edit it as well. So, but
cool. Well, guys, thanks a bunch. We got the Stanley Cup. I think they just finished the first first period. So 1-1 tie. So follow that, Game 7. And yeah, thanks for getting up to speed on the Outlap.
Hell yeah.
Hell